Imagine enjoying your early morning dog walk and then stumbling upon two dead bodies. It was summer 2009, and Heidi Childs could not have been more excited for her future. She lived in Montgomery County, she just turned 18, and had planned an appointment with a careers advisor for the next day. She was a really intelligent girl, so it felt like the world was her oyster. And it wasn't just her career that was exciting, she had a great love life too. She had a boyfriend called David Metzler, and the pair were childhood sweethearts. They'd grown up in Virginia together, originally meeting through a church youth group. And by the time that they were both at Virginia Tech College, they were inseparable. And they didn't ever need to do anything crazy to have fun. They weren't about like big grand gestures or big expensive dates. They were happy just chilling with a picnic, the two of them. So on the evening of the 26th of August, David planned to take Heidi on a date to a field in Jefferson National Forest. He knew this stunning spot. It was super chill. It was quite a secluded area, so it would give them some privacy. It was going to be perfect. They'd play the guitar, watch the sunset, quality time, just the two of them. Except it wasn't just the two of them. The couple arrived just after 8 p.m. that night, and what happened next is unclear. After David originally told his friends he'd be home pretty early because he had to finish some homework, he just never came back. At 8 a.m. the following morning, a dog walker was just sauntering through the park when all of a sudden he could just about make out the silhouette of two dead bodies. David was slumped in the driver's seat of his car, and there was glass all over the gravel by the door. Heidi was also lying motionless on the floor nearby. Police raced over there to try and figure out what the hell had gone on. It didn't make any sense to anybody. It was very clear both of the students had been shot, but why? Heidi's bag, phone, ID, and camera and lanyard were all missing, which made everybody wonder whether this was a robbery had gone wrong. But it's not a typical place that people would really go to. It was very out of the way. There's no phone signal there and little to no people on most days. The nearest business was a summer camp miles away. And the couple weren't involved in anything dodgy whatsoever. They were both devout Christians. They did their homework on time. They didn't get involved in any parties or any substances, anything like that. Some people started wondering maybe the couple stumbled upon something they shouldn't have seen, and they were then shot to keep them quiet. Like, that does seem to make the most sense to me. Another theory was that maybe a poacher had accidentally shot David and then shot Heidi to cover this up, or vice versa. Now, the first press conference revealed that DNA evidence had been collected, which they believed to be from the killer. But infuriatingly, they ran it through databases and absolutely zero matches. Although police did identify some potential cars of interest, the case eventually went cold and chillingly remains unsolved to this day.
If you're not on Mount Everest tour guide scam talk, you have got to hear this. So this all started when police in Nepal noticed a huge spike of climbers needing to be rescued by helicopter off Mount Everest between 2022 and 2025. In fact, nearly 5,000 climbers had to be rescued off the mountain. Come to find out, 32 tour guides were being paid by local hospitals to make the climbers they were supposed to be guiding up Everest sick and need to be rescued. Some guides would wait for their climbers to get a mild case of altitude sickness and would give them the medicine to treat it, but encourage them to drink tons of water, which apparently makes the symptoms 100 times worse. Other guides would mix baking powder into their climbers' food with the sole purpose of making them so sick they can't walk down the mountain on their own and need helicopter rescue. It's estimated local hospitals took in more than $20 million in insurance money and would target climbers from the UK and Australia because apparently it's easy to pull over scams on their insurance companies. And I'm sure you can imagine, but people spend up to $100,000 to climb Everest. You need permits, guides, accommodations. It's not cheap. Not to mention, people spend years preparing for this once-in-a-lifetime climb, and then to be poisoned by the guide you paid to take you is insane.
This popular TikToker allegedly essayed 7 victims, and the police believe that there are more. He also admitted himself that he attempted to take a man's life in prison over a bet. However, he didn't get caught for it at the time. He's not being charged with that, but he does have at least 12 counts associated with the essay of these victims. His name is Benjamin Gleason. He has 1.1 million followers here on TikTok, and he is 39 years old. According to police, these assaults occurred between 2011 and 2021. Police police did an extensive investigation into these allegations, which he was indicted for this past Friday, and he was arrested on the same day. He has pled not guilty. Now, I was able to find where he discussed his childhood, his life, his prison stint, everything. He claims he has borderline personality disorder. He had a really rough childhood, that his addiction began when he was just 12 or 13 years old. And basically, he was doing a lot of illegal bad things that landed him in prison. He claims about 2 weeks after he went to prison that he was in this TV room and him and another prisoner made a bet and that he won the bet. But Benjamin claims that this man didn't want to pay him and that these other guys were like, you can't just let him do that. You're going to have to do something to make a point. And I guess Benjamin was too afraid to do anything while the man was awake, so he waited until he was asleep. He said he sharpened a tomato paste can and then held it with a washcloth. He then says he went to the man and ear to ear. He used a prison term. I think he said $150, meaning they need 150 stitches. I don't know. That's just what he said. He claimed that they took the man from the jail, brought him to the hospital for treatment, and that the man never came back. So he doesn't know what ended up happening with him. He said after he did it, he went and flushed the tomato paste can and that they made them all line up and check everyone for a weapon and it was gone. He said that he was never caught for that and he felt comfortable talking about it when he did because he felt enough time had passed. There's no way to know if that story is factual or if he just wanted to look cool. But I think the police need to investigate it. Most places, there is no statute of limitations for attempting to do something like that. He then went on to talk about how he was a Crip and lived that lifestyle. As of right now, he is in jail. We are awaiting for his next court date. Police do believe there are more victims. And if that is you, please reach out to the police. So far, there are seven different people who have allegedly been traumatized by this man. If you are part of that, you deserve justice too.
If you thought your Airbnb host recording you and your children naked and then uploading the images onto the internet for all to see was as bad as it gets, you'd be wrong because it gets way worse. Turns out not only was he recording guests with cameras hidden throughout the house, he was stalking the guests as well. He would show up at the home while they were there and then film them as he hid in the bushes. Everyone meet the host from hell, 44-year-old Christian Edwards, who listed his Oakhurst, California home, which is located just 15 miles from Yosemite, on Airbnb in July 2025. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reported Edwards to authorities after they flagged his IP for distribution of CSAM. And get this, when cops arrived to serve the warrant, Edwards was actively watching one of his newly recorded videos. Police ended up seizing 30 cameras and computers that contained at least 4,000 individual files of CSAM. They also found a lifelike child doll dressed in kids' clothes with its hands tied behind its back that he was using for pleasure. Edwards is facing multiple felonies but was released on a $75,000 bail.
This cold case was just solved after 30 years. It's July 24th, 1996, when 7-year-old Morgan, her sisters, and some of their friends were playing outside of the Colony apartments where they all lived. But this beautiful summer day was about to turn dark as a dangerous predator was lurking around the apartment complex looking for his next victim. 20-something-year-old Robert Froberg had escaped from jail twice, was on the run, and had just stolen a maroon-colored van. And in broad daylight, Robert runs up, snatches Morgan, and takes off running with her. Witnesses immediately called the police and said they saw a young man, possibly in his 20s, driving a maroon van. Can I just say to the sketch artist and the witness who gave a description of Robert, y'all done one hell of a job. That looks just like him. But sadly, no matter how hard they tried, the police, the family, or the volunteers could not find any sign of Robert or Morgan. 2 days later, the van was found abandoned, but there was nobody in it. It wasn't until 3 months later, on October 20th, when they finally found Morgan's remains abandoned in Tennessee. And her family was just absolutely heartbroken. Robert was caught by the police again and taken back to prison, but he didn't tell anyone what he had done to Morgan, so her case went unsolved for 30 years. That is, up until recently, when DNA was tested with the new technology and they finally got a hit. The hair found in that maroon van was sent off to the FBI laboratories and it was a perfect match to Robert Froberg, who is currently still sitting in prison on other charges. The police went and interviewed Robert in prison and told him they had this DNA evidence, so he finally confessed to kidnapping and strangling Morgan to death. He's claiming he only strangled her, but I don't think that's all he did. By the time they found her body, it'd been months in hot weather. She was probably very deteriorated, so they probably couldn't tell whether he essayed her or not. He had a history of being a predator. He was out searching for a child to kidnap, kidnapped, so we all know what he was going to do or did do. They filed a complaint that charged Robert Froberg with her kidnapping, resulting in her death. If Robert is convicted, he could face only 2 potential sentences, life in prison or the death penalty. But to just know that that was the last face that this baby had to see before she was viciously murdered makes my stomach turn. Just imagine a lurch-looking mother attacking you, a damn cracked-out Herman monster. That's nightmare fuel. Morgan's family never gave up on her. Neither did the Bowling Green community or its law enforcement community. This is what gives me hope that one day we might solve the JonBenet Ramsey case.
She was last seen by her boyfriend, and 13 years later, we still don't know where she is. What happened to Erin Scala? Patricia Erin Scala was 27 years old and living in Sarasota, Florida at the time of her disappearance, and she went by Erin. When she was in high school, she was a straight A honor student and had dreams of becoming a doctor. This was a case that was recommended to me on a recent video I posted about cases that need some more attention. Unfortunately, this case does not have a whole lot of info about it, and there's not a very big timeline of what happened before she disappeared. Erin had been living with her boyfriend John on Vanna Drive, but at some point, she decided to move out and was staying in some hotels. On May 22nd, 2012, John says that he dropped her off at a hotel, but this was the last time she was ever seen. I can't find any information on who or when the last person was that saw her other than her boyfriend, just because I tend to take that with kind of a grain of salt. But when her mother didn't hear from her, she ended up making a missing persons report in June of 2012. In September of 2018, police got a tip from somebody who knew Erin that she may have been killed and buried on that Vanna Drive property. However, John had moved in June of 2016, and it had had one other owner since then, and they did a few renovations. However, they did allow the police to examine the home, but they dug on that property for 2 days and found nothing. Erin would be 40 years old today, and she had a full life ahead of her. If you have any information about the disappearance of Erin Scala, you can contact the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office at 941-861-4108.
On February 17, 2025, police in Waterbury, Connecticut responded to what initially appeared to be a routine house fire. Instead, they discovered a disturbing situation that quickly turned into a major criminal investigation involving this woman right here. Inside of the home, officers found a man in his early 30s who was extremely emaciated, unkempt, and in poor health. He was later identified in court documents only as S to protect his identity. He reportedly weighed just 68 pounds and appeared to have suffered severe long-term neglect. Authorities believe that he intentionally set the fire as a means of escaping the home. According to an arrest warrant and police reports, S told investigators that his stepmother, Kimberly Sullivan, had kept him confined inside the home for more than 20 years. Prosecutors allege that he was locked in a small room measuring 8 by 9 feet. He reportedly said he was only allowed out of the room briefly to do chores. He also described being forced to use bottles or newspaper to use the bathroom and said the room had no heat or air conditioning. S told investigators that he had not left the property freely since his early teenage years. He also described severe deprivation throughout his childhood, including limited access to food and extreme isolation. Kimberly Sullivan was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of kidnapping. She's pleaded not guilty and denies the allegations against her. In addition to the criminal case against Kimberly, a court-appointed conservator for S has filed a notice of intent to sue the state of Connecticut. The claim alleges that the Department of Children and Families failed to act despite repeated warning signs. According to the filing, school officials reportedly made as many as 20 reports over the years expressing concern about his condition, including that he appeared extremely small, thin, and neglected prior to him going missing. The lawsuit argues that earlier intervention could have prevented years of alleged abuse. It seeks at least $50,000 in damages, though it still requires approval before it can move forward. Kimberly has been released on a $300,000 bond while her case moves through the court system, but if she is convicted of the current charges she's facing, she's looking at spending decades in prison, which may be the rest of her natural life.
My great-grandmother was a murderer, and she got away with it. Great-grandmother I am talking about comes from my dad's side, so this would be my dad's grandma. She ended up marrying a man named Lawrence Robertson. Both my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather were both severe alcoholics. It was so severe that they were actually put in the local newspaper to not allow these people in your bars because they just made a fool of themselves. They were banned from multiple bars. So on April 15th, 1997, my great-grandfather goes to the bar behind my grandma's back. And she's angry, okay, because she wants to drink too. Also, this is just my speculation that she would probably be assuming that he was with another woman. I can't find the articles on any of this because it was so long ago, but this is just like hearsay, right? Anyway, she sits on her couch right at the front door of the entrance of the home, and she's sitting there all fucking night waiting for him to get home. As soon as he opens the door, she has a shotgun in her fucking lap, and she stands up and blows him the fuck away. And as you can imagine, he dies immediately. And she calls the cop and she was like, "Hey, I just killed my husband. Come clean up this mess." The cops come and they arrest her. And she takes this case all the way up to a jury trial. She did not take any plea deals. She was like, "Fuck that. I'm taking this to trial," right? And from what I heard, her whole defense was self-defense, that he was potentially attacking her. So she had to kill him. But word in my family is that that's not the case. I don't know. I don't know what the truth is. My family thinks that she was strictly just angry that he went to the bar without her, and that's why she killed him. I don't know if he was physically violent, but the jury believed her and they found her not guilty. Another crazy part of the story is they actually had 3 children together. And one of their sons, which would be my great uncle, actually went on to murder someone as well. He got in a really big bar fight and supposedly he beat this man so fucking bad that he ended up killing him. I don't know, it's fucking crazy, like, doing this true crime shit and also, like, realizing that a lot of my family history has a lot of murder in it as well, but thanks for listening.
And then, yeah, us being how y'all sit on these chairs without something to sit on.
A woman and her 2 young daughters were found brutally murdered inside of their apartment, and you will never guess who had committed this crime, and the reasoning is absolutely ridiculous. Now, this story does have some graphic details and may be very hard to hear, so viewer discretion is advised. This story takes place in Anchorage, Alaska, and in the 1980s, the oil business in Alaska was booming, but eventually the oil prices had crashed, so a lot of people got laid off from their jobs, including John Newman. So he decided to go to California to go to school to be a locksmith. John's wife Nancy and their 2 young daughters, 8-year-old Melissa and 3-year-old Angie, decided to stay in Alaska. Nancy is a waitress at a restaurant, and one Sunday morning she did not show up for her shift. Now, this was not like her. She was always at work and always on time. So her coworkers got very concerned, and even her sister works with her. So her sister went over to her apartment to do a welfare check, and what she found was a nightmare. They had found Nancy in her bedroom. She had been SA'd and strangled with a pillowcase. They also found 8-year-old Melissa in her bedroom. She also had been SA'd and strangled with a pillowcase. And then they found 3-year-old Angie in her bedroom. She had bled out from a cut to her throat. None of the neighbors saw or heard anything. There was no forced entry to the apartment, but Nancy's purse and also her camera was missing. There was a knife that was missing from the butcher block. There was also a tin can where Nancy kept her tip money. That had been opened and someone took all of that money. They also found a damp rag in the bathroom sink. Now, at the time of the murders, John was in California and there was no evidence suggesting that he had gone back to Alaska. So he was immediately ruled out. But whoever committed this crime spent a lot of time in this apartment, possibly someone who has been in this apartment before. Fingerprints were found all over the apartment that did not belong to the immediate family, which included the front door, the tin can where Nancy kept her money, and also the bathroom and other parts of the apartment. And these fingerprints belonged to Kirby Anthony, which is the nephew of the family. Kirby is a 23-year-old drifter. He moved to Alaska from Idaho and needed a place to stay. So Nancy and John decided, you can stay with us temporarily until you find your own place. But it was getting kind of crowded with 2 young kids in this tiny apartment, so he eventually moved out about 2 weeks before the homicides. Kirby claims that he has an alibi, so the night before the murders, he was out with friends, and then the next morning, he was at Burger King having breakfast. Inside the apartment, they found large amounts of hair in every single room of the apartment that did not belong to the Newman family, but they were Caucasian hairs. And in the victims' bedrooms, they were actually pubic hairs, which were similar to Kirby's. But he was living there, so they're trying to figure out when these hairs got on the floor. Now, hairs can travel from one room to another from socks, but it's very rare that you would see pubic hairs coming from the parents' bedroom into the children's bedroom. Now, these hairs were damp and moist. Now, usually, if these hairs have been there for quite a bit of period of time, they would be dry and also have dirt on them. The damp rag in the bathroom sink had some green fibers on it, which they matched to a pair of gloves that were in Nancy's bedroom. They also found the victim's blood on this rag as well, but they also found pubic hairs with partial egg casings, which were from pubic lice. And they found out that these hairs were similar to Kirby's, and he had just been recently treated for pubic lice. They also found Kirby's palm print on the wall above Nancy's bed and also on the wall near Melissa's bed as well. And they also found his fingerprints on the tin can where Melissa kept her tip money. Kirby's roommate said that when Kirby came home, he had blood on his clothing and he immediately went to go wash his clothes, and he was counting a large amount of change on the table. So now we're all thinking, what is the motive here? Why did he do this brutal crime? Well, Nancy had called her husband John while he was in California, stating that Kirby was being very inappropriate. He had struck the kids at least once and was making her very uncomfortable. So John said, "Tell him to leave." So that's what she did, and this made Kirby very angry. Nancy always kept the apartment clean and would vacuum quite often, and according to one of her neighbors, she had vacuumed recently. So they decided to examine the contents of the vacuum, and they did not find any pubic hairs inside that vacuum. So Kirby was in that apartment shortly after she vacuumed and right up to the time of the murders. Friends of Kirby had stated that the night before the homicides, he was out drinking and using coke, and then he went over to that apartment and went into a homicidal rage. He brutally attacked Nancy and her 2 young daughters, all because he got kicked out of that apartment. I cannot make this up. So Kirby is on trial and he pleads not guilty, and he decides to represent himself. Wonder how that's going to go for him. But his defense is that the police had framed him for this crime. You cannot make this up. But it took the jury less than 2 hours to deliberate, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 357 years in prison. I cannot imagine what John was going through, knowing that his own nephew had murdered his entire family, all because John had told Nancy to tell him to get out of that apartment because he was being inappropriate. Who could do this to an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old? It is so sickening. It makes me so sick to my stomach. And I don't know what he was thinking representing himself and trying to blame the police and saying that they framed him. It just makes no sense to me. But he's exactly where he should be. He will never see the light of day again, and he deserves to spend the rest of his life and rot in a cell. So let me know what you guys thought of this story. Thanks for watching. I love you all. We'll see you in the next one, and please take care of yourselves.
He sat inside that prison cell and looked the system dead in the eyes and said, "I will kill people. I will eat their hearts. Do not let me out." And Nebraska said, "Oh, okay. Well, let's release you anyways." 10 years early. And just days after walking out of those doors, this man went on a killing spree that left 4 people dead. This is the story of Nico Jenkins. Ever since Nico was a kid, violence and abuse has always surrounded him. I mean, he was getting on his hands and knees on a bathroom floor, cleaning up somebody else's blood before he probably even went to school. By 7 years old, he was already bringing weapons to school. By 11, he had joined a gang. And at 17 years old, he was sitting in a courtroom being sentenced to 15 years in prison for carjacking. And you would think he'd realize his wrong ways and be like, okay, I seriously need to better myself. But no, instead, Nico went into prison and kept going. He was always assaulting inmates, assaulting guards, participating in prison riots, getting written up 71 times between 2004 and 2012 alone for violations including creating a shiv out of a toilet brush, racking up so many additional charges that 5 more years got added onto his sentence, bringing it up to 20 years. And then things behind those walls stopped being just violent and started becoming something much darker. Because Nico started hallucinating, started drinking his own bodily fluids, started unraveling in ways that even hardened correctional officers were alarmed by. And the prison had no choice but to keep him in solitary confinement for roughly 60% of his entire sentence. Not as punishment, but because they genuinely could not figure out how to keep the other inmates safe around him. As early as May 2009, prison records showed Nico telling staff that an ancient Egyptian god named Apophis, the serpent deity
deity of chaos and destruction was speaking to him directly and commanding him to kill children. That if they ever released him back into the real world, people were going to die. That he would eat the hearts of his victims. That the violence inside of him has found a name and a purpose, and that there was no version of his release that ended without bloodshed. So naturally, the state of Nebraska was like, okay, I hear you. I definitely hear you. So let's just take you out 10 years early. Yeah? Just 10 days after being released, Nico caught up his sister and his cousin, and together they lured out two men named Jorge Ruiz and Juan Uribe Peña away from a bar by setting up what looked like a robbery. And when those two men realized what was happening and tried to run, tried to do any rational thing a person could do when they feel like their life is about to slip away, Nico raised his weapon and shot both of them dead in the street, leaving them there and walking away without a trace of hesitation. 8 days after that, him and his sister hunted down a man named Curtis, and they ambushed him and killed him. Which, remember what I said, the whole family is insane. His own mother has been the one supplying him with the ammunition to commit these crimes. And then just 2 days later, Nico decided that he wanted a car. So him and his uncle drove over to a McDonald's and spotted Andrea Kruger, a mother of 3 children, sitting in her car doing something so painfully ordinary, just trying to grab a meal and go home. And Nico walked up to her, grabbed her body, dragging her out of her own seat, and he shot her in the head at point-blank range right there in the parking lot. Then he drove away in her car like she had never existed at all. After just 29 days of being free, he has already taken the lives of 4 people. When police finally caught up to him, Nico's story just kept on changing. First, he told him that his sister and his cousin were the one who did everything, that he had nothing to do with it. And then he sat down for an 8-hour recorded confession where he walked investigators through every single murder with this calm demeanor that was deeply unsettling, just owning all of it in this vivid detail. And then he changed his story again, landing finally on the version that he would carry into court, which was that none of these were murders at all. That every single one of those deaths was a sacred ritual sacrifice carried out under the divine command of Apophis, the Egyptian god of chaos, and that he was simply a vessel fulfilling a holy obligation. During his own trial, which he chose to represent himself in, Nico spoke in tongues, howling and laughing as the prosecutors were reading the details of his victims' deaths out loud in court. But then he did something that somehow managed to be even more audacious than all of that. He sued the state of Nebraska for $24.5 million, arguing that they had manufactured this entire catastrophe by releasing him after he had explicitly, repeatedly, and on record told them exactly what would have happened the moment that he got out. And I'll be honest, his logic was not completely wrong, because this is the man that they consider to be too dangerous to be around other convicted criminals. And somehow they thought releasing him around regular civilians with zero oversight was the reasonable next step. I mean, even the victims' families agreed. The families of Andrea Kruger and Curtis Bradford also sued the state of Nebraska for the same reason, arguing that the prison officials had every single tool they needed to prevent those deaths, and they still chose to not use a single one of them. Nico Jenkins was sentenced to death 4 times over, plus 450 years in prison on weapon charges. His sister Erica got life in prison and still somehow found time awaiting sentencing to attack their cousin in a jail cell with a bike lock stuffed inside of a sock. Their mother Lori got 10 years in federal prison for buying the ammunition used in the killing, and their uncle Warren got 40 years for his role in Andrea Kruger's murder. So that means that the whole family is behind bars. Thank God. And as of right now, in 2026, Nico Jenkins is still alive on death row in Nebraska, still breathing, still existing, still on the same planet as all of us, which is extremely disturbing to think about. But please be safe out there and be kind to each other. I love you guys so much. I will see you in my next video. Mwah.
He lured women with modelling jobs and then photographed their final moments before he took their lives. Harvey Glattman was born in 1927 in the Bronx, New York, and he grew up doing some pretty questionable things. He would progress into stealing lingerie from women's apartments that he'd broken into. He started stalking, and he even SA'd some people. He spent some time in prison before being paroled in 1948. After this, by day, he was a quiet TV repairman, looking completely normal, but behind the scenes, he Harvey had a strict routine. In the 1950s, Harvey would scan newspapers and casting adverts looking for young women who were chasing modelling careers. He'd contact them using fake names, offer glamorous photo shoots and magazine opportunities. When the women believed that they were going to build their careers and make a big portfolio, they were instead actually walking into a trap set by Harvey. He would take them to isolated locations, sometimes his apartment on their own, sometimes the desert. While there, he would tie them up at gunpoint. Then he would take photos. At first, they were staged poses that he would get the women to do, but then as the women froze in fear when they realised what was going on, the scenes just became more and more disturbing. He would slowly move from photo shoot to murder. And even after he'd done that, it didn't stop there. He continued photographing their bodies, treating it like some kind of artwork. Between 1957 and 1958, Harvey murdered at least 3 women, including Judith Dull, Shirley Bridgeford, and Ruth Mercado. She was another victim who'd had the same exact photo shoot situation set up that he liked. He went to pick her up at her apartment, but she wasn't very well, so she said she couldn't go. And that left Harvey absolutely furious about the fact that they couldn't go and, do his plan. So he instead went back to her apartment later that night. He broke in and he essayed her multiple times. The next day, he forced her to get into his car, took her to the desert, made her take these photographs while she was tied up. He then strangled her to death and left her body there in the desert for coyotes to find. Luckily, this pattern didn't go on much longer, and in October 1958, he picked up another victim, Lorraine Vigil, a young, aspiring model. Just like the others, he pulled a weapon out on her and he forced her to tie herself up. But this time, something went wrong, and while they were driving, Harvey became distracted and Lorraine was able to jump out of the moving car. Because she survived, she was able to give a really detailed description of Harvey to the police, and within hours, he was arrested. Inside his apartment, investigators found cameras, ropes, weapons, and hundreds of photographs documenting all of his crimes. He later confessed, and in 1959, Harvey Glattman was executed in the gas chamber, but even today, the photographs that he left behind from all of his crimes are considered some of the most disturbing evidence ever recovered.
Let's give it up to Louisiana, who just court-ordered 40-year-old Zachary Dwayne Doolittle to undergo castration after pleading guilty to sexually assaulting a family member who was under the age of 13 back in 2024. There are currently 2 types of castration allowed by Louisiana state law, surgical and chemical, with the end goal of both being to reduce the testosterone level in the offender so they're less likely to reoffend after release. Surgical castration is the surgical removal of the testicles, whereas a chemical castration uses medication to lower testosterone, therefore lowering one's sex drive. The drug is called medroxyprogesterone acetate and is more commonly known as MPA. Up until recently, Louisiana state law allowed for the court to order chemical castration as a condition of release, but in August of 2024, the state approved the use of surgical castration if the convicted offender agreed. Doolittle was also sentenced to 45 years in prison for crimes against nature after being charged with multiple counts of sexual assault against the family member.
Before officially confessing, the Go-Go Beach serial killer told his wife that he killed 8 women. But Rex Heuermann has been officially identified as the Go-Go Beach killer after years of going undetected. The remains of several women were found around Go-Go Beach on Long Island between 1993 and 2011. And the killer was unidentified for years until 2023, when former architect Rex Heuermann was identified as a suspect after DNA evidence linked him to the crimes. He was arrested and charged with multiple murders, but until earlier this month, he was maintaining his innocence. But finally, on April 8th, he admitted to what he had done. He pleaded guilty to murdering Melissa Barthélemy, Megan Waterman, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Amber Costello, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, Sandra Castilla, and Karen Vergata. At his plea hearing, it was revealed that authorities found evidence that Heuermann not only killed these women, but that he also searched for articles about a task force that was formed to investigate the murders in 2022, and that he used an online account to repeatedly view images of his victims and their families. Now, Asa Elrup, the former wife of Rex Heuermann, has said in a recent interview that he confessed to her that he killed 8 women. Elrup said in an interview, quote, he said he killed 8 women. 8. He said, I wasn't home through all of them. He said they were killed in his room downstairs, all except 1. And she said that when he confessed this, he looked very nervous. She said, quote, I said to him, so Mr. Kierman, I understand that you are confessing to me on these murders. And he agreed. And now he has admitted that to the court. As part of his plea deal with prosecutors, Kierman has agreed to a punishment amounting to several life sentences without the possibility of parole. A judge will ultimately decide the sentence at a follow-up hearing, which has been scheduled for June 17th. Kierman will also be cooperating with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to better understand criminal behavior, basically like Edmund Kemper a la Mindhunter. But now the families of these victims don't have to go through trials and him potentially getting off. He has pleaded guilty to all of their murders.
She paid her student for compliments. Haley Beck is one of 2 teachers accused of grooming the same student, and somehow neither have been charged, and her text messages are downright embarrassing. You might recognize her. She is the sister of a very well-known TikToker. According to the documents that show her text, she was going to go to a Post Malone concert, and she's texting the victim. She sends him a fit check and says, one compliment gets you $5 gas money. And he responds, well, I'm gonna have to shell out about 5 compliments. And she says, better start now. Well, no, now they're forced. I don't want them anymore. He replies back. He compliments her boots. He says her top is cute, that the hat is fire, the belt's okay, and I like your hair straight. Boom. And she says, was that hard for you to be honest? You should have seen me the last time I wore this shirt. It was tight on me. He says, crazy, cough it up. She says, you know, just say you look good would have sufficed. Why the hell are you driving 72 miles tonight? He replies, you said 5. And then he says why he is traveling. She says, yeah, and all while you have a girlfriend on the side, but at least you know that I'm not going to start arguments with you randomly. I don't know if this is supposed to be a compliment or offensive. He said, compliment, you're just not in a corn star body. That's all. I live a wild life. What can I say? She goes, and there's the insult. He said, is it really an insult if it's just a fact? He said, so is this admitting you have a girlfriend? Because if that's the case, I'm not doing nothing with you. She wanted him to not be with the girlfriend that was his age. She was also allegedly jealous of the other teacher, Angela. Angela allegedly sent the same student that these text messages are with a video of her nude saying the student's name. The entire investigation into Haley stemmed from the investigation into Angela. He says, I don't have a girlfriend for real. She says, okay, thank you. I really hope you weren't trolling me though, because weirdly, that is when I'd cut off everything. That's it. That's when she would cut it off. Not like us being cool, just my physical and money services. So I hope you aren't lying just to keep it. And his reply, nah, for sure. I mean, if I was 27 and had a boyfriend that was a cop while I'm breaking the law with my student in all capital letters, I'd probably be conservative with my services as well. Then she says she's on her period, but her mouth is still good to go. Then she allegedly offers to purchase him adult drinks and asked him when he wanted her to go downtown, if you know what I mean. Then she sounds a little jealous, in my opinion. She's like, was mainly asking so you could actually come to my place again sometime, unless you found others to do that stuff for you now, apparently. Then it appears that they're talking about him breaking up with the girlfriend, but a lot of it is redacted. She said, I knew that was going to happen, to be honest. Like, you chose to be the nice guy. There's no compromise in breakups, but somehow she's still going to do the same crap. Like, do it now when you have the opportunity to be the one that didn't do anything wrong, or else the cycle will just keep going. But your life, do you. I just feel like you were so ready to be done. Oh, she wants him to break up with her so bad, it sounds like, in my opinion. He texts her and calls her a sugar mommy, and she said, you better suck up right now because I cried myself to sleep last night because you didn't say love you back. I also decided I don't like the sugar mommy title. It makes me feel used. He said, oh gosh, what title do you prefer, crybaby? She says, watch it. I'm being drama. I didn't cry, but I was visibly shocked. Darling or doll always suffices. He said, I fell asleep. Big whoop. Requested money. Sugar baby requesting money from doll face sugar mama. She said, if I cut you off from the money benefit from all of this, I really fear you would never speak to me. He said, I don't know if we should try to find out. She said, is that a threat? I think you would miss me for me just a little bit. Then they talk about having inappropriate contact and whether they could do it inside or outside in the car. She said, if no one was home, then yeah, preferably that, but I guess I'll settle for being a rebellious teen. Ma'am, you have not been a teen for quite some time. He responds and said, yep, just like always, a big kid stuck in high school, effing a high schooler. Shit crazy. The world we live in. Am I right? He called her a big kid stuck in high school, effing a high schooler. How that text wouldn't dawn on you how crazy this is just mind-blowing. She said, like, why are you complaining and making me feel bad? Like, you're getting basically a relationship out of me without the arguments and constant need for commitment and reassurance, so you're welcome, which just the little text we have, that is not even true. He said, not necessarily complaining, clutch, sugar mama for real, corn star, all the perks for real, cars, hotels, even the apartment. What a gal. She said, yeah, and all the while you have a girlfriend on the side. And then she appears to be talking about Angela. She says, like, listen, if I were to do any of that stuff, like, still, that's extremely wrong, like, so wrong. Don't get it twisted. But like, and I sent to multiple people, like, that is actually insane. But for her, who was like 50 years old with a husband and kids, that's wrong times wrong. He said, nah, that crap's crazy. Well, you with me, that's different. That's different because look at me. He said, it's different. I turn 18 soon anyway. Haley says, no, it's not even about that. Like, it's the fact that, like, I mean, again, I'm not saying this to rationalize this at all, but like, I'm like in my 20s, single with no kids. Again, that doesn't make it okay for me to be freaky. If I was going to do that, even just to you, just like, I don't know. That's why I'm weird about it for so many different reasons, obviously. But yeah, that's why she's interesting. That's why it explains unintelligible videos. He said, yeah, I know why. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand. Like, obviously I do know why, but I just know that, like, it's fine if you do, because like everything with me, I'm just chill. No one knows about me really. Haley says, yeah, but like, obviously people found out about stuff that was on the DL with other people. So like, how did that come to be? Like, that's what's scary too about even talking sometimes. Like, how did that happen? He said, yeah, but like, I don't have the need to do that. I'm not talking to nobody. Like, I'm literally just mind my own self. So he appears to be talking about Angela, and he said maybe her husband's the one that found out, which is interesting because it's been reported that the victim's grandparent is the one who turned in the video. It's also concerning that his parents, allegedly, according to what's being reported, don't want to cooperate because they don't want to hurt his college athlete career. Haley replies and says, yeah, dude, like, I don't know. That would be crazy for him to turn her in like that. I don't know. I asked my little cop guy friend, and he hasn't responded yet because he's sleeping, so I'll see what he says. Apparently, they continue to talk about their suspicions of the situation, but that was redacted. And they talk about jealousy and how to conduct themselves in the same classroom together, and Haley says, no, I've actually heard that before from somebody. Actually, a couple of people, like, being dead serious. When I was talking to other guy students in particular, they got a little jealous apparently. Like, other high school boys are jealous when she's talking to other high school boy students. We've seen those videos about her connection to her students. The writing was on the wall. There was also a ton of the like secret swipe up snaps that they were sending back and forth, which police at the time of this report hadn't accessed yet. Police had actually submitted charges a while ago, and the DA was like, nope, sorry, keep investigating. It's not enough. How it wasn't enough, I don't know. But the police resubmitted everything with the new stuff they found this past Thursday. So now we wait to see if they're going to move forward. It is actually terrifying how many predator teachers there are out there. It's scary. And on top of having predator teachers, we also have school systems who just seem to not care. The principal at Haley and Angela's school, he was told by students and other people that something didn't seem right here, that there was a concern. And yet that wasn't told to police until they executed the warrant for Angela. Every person working in the school system is supposed to protect children, and when you fail, everyone should be held accountable for that.